All right, so today we're diving deep into Kenyan politics. We're talking impeachment,
Mhm.
specifically uh, of a deputy president. Sounds kind of straightforward, but trust me, it's anything but.
Yeah, it gets complicated. Like, it really shows how the different parts of the Kenyan government are supposed to work together
Mm.
and, sometimes how they clash.
Right, exactly. So we're talking about Rigathi Gachagua, Kenya's current deputy president. And he found himself in some serious hot water, accused of some pretty heavy stuff. Things like stirring ethnic divisions and undermining the judiciary.
Yeah, these accusations are a big deal. In Kenya, this isn't just like everyday political back and forth. This stuff goes way deeper, like to the heart of how their system works. And it brings up some really sensitive issues. So to understand what's going on, we got to break it down.
Okay, so like step by step, like almost a guide to how impeachment works in Kenya. Sounds good.
Exactly.
Okay, so first things first. What does it even mean to stir ethnic divisions, and why is that such a big deal in Kenya?
Yeah. Well, Kenya has a history of political tensions. And those tensions are often tied to its diverse ethnic groups. So when someone in power is accused of exploiting those divisions, using them for their own gain, it's a huge red flag. It's seen as a threat to national unity.
Got it. So not something to be taken lightly. These accusations against Gachagua are serious business. But how does the whole impeachment process actually work? Where does it all begin?
Okay, so it all starts at the Senate. Think of them like the referees in this whole political game. They have the power to investigate, to put the deputy president on trial, and ultimately decide if he should be removed from office.
So the Senate is like a high court, but specifically for impeachments.
Yeah, that's a good way to put it.
Yeah.
They gather evidence, they listen to arguments from both sides, and then senators vote on whether the charges are serious enough to actually kick the deputy president out of office.
Okay, so in Gachagua's case, the Senate decided to launch a full-blown impeachment inquiry. But then just before he's supposed to testify, he ends up in the hospital. Chest pains. So was this a genuine health scare? Or was it a political move to maybe delay things?
That's where things get really interesting. Gachagua's supporters, they claim it was legitimate, a real health crisis. But his critics see it as a tactic, a way to stall the proceedings, maybe even hoping to gain some public sympathy.
It's definitely a twist, adds another layer of complexity to this whole saga. And then to make things even more dramatic, the Senate decides to go ahead with the impeachment vote, even though Gachagua was still in the hospital.
Right, and the vote goes through, they impeach him, so it seemed like the case was closed. They even had Interior Minister Kithure Kindiki ready to be sworn in as the new deputy president.
But wait, there's more. Just when you think it's over, the High Court steps in, puts a screeching halt to the whole swearing-in ceremony.
Yeah.
Talk about a cliffhanger.
Right. The High Court basically dropped a bombshell, saying that the Senate, they might not have followed all the rules, all the proper procedures. During the impeachment process, it was a big reminder that no one is above the law, not even the Senate.
So this wasn't about whether Gachagua was guilty or innocent. This was about making sure the process was fair, like by the book. So what exactly were the High Court's concerns? Did they think Gachagua's rights were violated?
So they didn't directly say whether they thought he was treated unfairly. They focused more on how the Senate handled everything. Was everything done the right way? Did Gachagua have a real chance to defend himself? These are the questions the High Court wanted answered.
So this is where we see those checks and balances of the Kenyan government,
Right.
like really coming into play. The Senate has the power to impeach, but the High Court can step in, make sure they're doing it the right way.
Exactly. It's like having a referee who also has a referee. It's all about making sure no one branch of government gets too powerful. And this is a crucial point. For understanding how Kenya's democracy is supposed to work, it's about balance.
All right, checks and balances.
Yeah.
Keeping things in check.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's all about making sure everyone plays by the rules.
So we've got this intense back and forth. The
Yeah.
Senate's trying to remove Gachagua, the High Court's hitting the brakes on the whole process, and just when you think this story can't get any wilder, Gachagua drops a bombshell. He starts publicly accusing President Ruto, his former ally, of being vicious. He even claims that his life is in danger.
Wow. This is where the personal drama really takes over. Like, it goes beyond just the legal battle now. Gachagua and Ruto were a team during the election, and now they're publicly throwing accusations at each other. It's like, what's really going on here?
Right, it's like a political drama unfolding in real time. Was there always tension between them? Or did something specific happen to trigger this falling out?
It's hard to say for sure, but there are a few theories going around. Some people say it's just a personality clash, two strong-willed leaders who just can't seem to get along. Others think it's more about policy disagreements.
So maybe they had different ideas about how to run the country.
Exactly. And then there's always the possibility of a power struggle. Maybe Gachagua felt like Ruto was sidelining him or trying to consolidate his own power.
So lots of political maneuvering happening behind the scenes. And we can't forget that President Ruto has remained pretty silent throughout all of this. Like he hasn't really responded to Gachagua's accusations. What do you make of that?
Well, Ruto's silence is almost as loud as Gachagua's accusations. Some people see it as a sign of weakness, like he's struggling to control the situation. Others think he's playing it smart, staying above the fray, letting the legal process play out.
So like he's trying to let the storm pass without getting caught in it. Regardless of his strategy, though, this whole situation raises some big questions about what this means for the average Kenyan citizen.
Yeah, that's a really important point. Beyond the headlines and the political drama, this stuff has real consequences for people. It creates uncertainty and instability at the highest levels of government.
So it's not just about Gachagua and Ruto, it's about the potential impact on the whole country.
Exactly. When there's turmoil at the top, it can affect everything. From the economy to people's sense of security, it can make it harder to attract foreign investment, and it can even lead to social unrest.
It's a reminder that politics isn't just a game.
Right. It's not just something politicians play.
It affects everyone.
Hmm.
And in a country like Kenya, with a history of political instability and ethnic tensions, any event that could make those divisions worse is a major concern.
Absolutely. So while we're trying to make sense of all this, it's important to remember the human element. How are these events impacting everyday Kenyans, the people just trying to live their lives? That's something we can't forget.
And going back to Gachagua's accusations against Ruto, just to be clear, at this point, they're just accusations. We haven't seen any hard evidence to back them up. But even without proof, these claims have caused a deep split within the ruling party.
Right, and that split has fueled all sorts of speculation
Yeah.
about this power struggle at the very top of the Kenyan government.
It's like we're getting a glimpse behind the curtain of Kenyan politics. And what we're seeing is messy and complicated. So let's try to break down the different perspectives here. What's Gachagua's side of the story?
Okay, so Gachagua and his supporters, they claim that he's the victim of a political witch hunt. They're saying that the charges against him are made up and that Ruto is orchestrating his downfall.
So they're saying that Gachagua is being targeted unfairly because he dared to challenge those in power.
Exactly. They see him as a strong leader who's being silenced for
Mm.
speaking truth to power.
Okay, so that's Gachagua's side. Now, what about Ruto's perspective?
Well, or rather, the lack of one.
Right, he's been remarkably quiet this whole time.
Yeah, and that silence has just added fuel to the fire,
Mm.
leading to all sorts of interpretations. Some people see it as a calculated move, a way to avoid escalating the conflict. Others believe he's just biding his time, waiting for the right moment to make his move.
It's a classic political strategy. Silence can be a powerful weapon. But we also have to consider the perspective of the Senate. The body that actually voted to impeach Gachagua. What's their take on all of this?
Well, the Senate's saying that they followed the rules, that
Mhm.
the evidence against Gachagua was strong, and that their decision was based on the facts. They're basically saying, we did our job, we investigated, we deliberated, and we voted.
But of course, not everyone buys that. Some people believe that the whole impeachment was politically motivated, that Gachagua was targeted, for reasons that go beyond just the charges themselves.
Right, and then there's the perspective that matters most, the Kenyan people. How are they reacting to all of this? What are they saying?
Well, it seems like public opinion is pretty divided. Some people are outraged by Gachagua's alleged actions, and they believe that he deserves to be removed from office. Others are more skeptical of the charges, and they see this whole thing as a power grab.
And of course, there are a lot of Kenyans who are just worried about what this all means for their country. They're concerned about the instability, the potential for violence, and the impact on the economy.
It's a lot to process,
Yeah.
and as we're trying to make sense of it all, it's important to remember that there are multiple perspectives at play here. We need to be careful about just accepting one side's story.
Exactly. We need to think critically about the information we're getting, consider the biases that might be involved, and weigh the evidence carefully. It's not about picking sides, it's about understanding the complexity of the situation.
It's like we're watching this high-stakes chess match, playing out in real time. Every move has consequences, and it's hard to tell who's going to come out on top. But let's step back for a second and think about what this whole impeachment saga tells us about Kenyan democracy as a whole.
What's really interesting here is that we're seeing a clash between old and new, like old ways of doing politics in Kenya versus new ways. Gachagua, with his focus on ethnic alliances and patronage, he represents that more traditional approach. But Ruto, on the other hand, seems to be pushing for something more modern, a more technocratic style of government. This kind of clash was bound to happen at some point.
It's like a power struggle that goes beyond just these two guys. It's about where Kenya is headed, both politically and socially.
Exactly. It's a defining moment for the country. The decisions made in the next few weeks and months, they're going to have a huge impact on Kenya's political landscape and its future.
So as we wrap up our deep dive here, what are the key things we should be watching for as this story continues to unfold? Like, what signs should we look for to see if things are headed in a positive or negative direction?
Well, one crucial thing to watch is whether Ruto can really consolidate his power. Can he take control of this whole situation? If he can pull that off, it could mean a shift towards a more centralized style of leadership.
But if he can't keep his party together and silence all the dissent, it could lead to even more instability.
Exactly. And we also can't forget about the judiciary. What role are they going to play in all of this? Will they continue to assert their independence and challenge the executive branch when necessary? Or will they be pressured to side with the ruling party?
Yeah, their decisions in the next few months are going to be huge. They'll determine the balance of power and the future of democratic institutions in Kenya.
Absolutely. And of course, the most important factor in all of this is the Kenyan people. How are they going to respond? Will they just be passive observers? Or will they demand more from their leaders? More accountability, more transparency?
Their actions and their voices, they're what will ultimately decide what happens next.
This whole situation really highlights how fragile democracy is. It needs constant attention and participation from all citizens to stay healthy.
This has been a really fascinating deep dive into the complexities of Kenyan politics and the challenges facing this nation. I think we've all learned a lot about how power works, how it's challenged, and how it's ultimately held accountable.
And these aren't just questions for Kenya. They're relevant to democracies all over the world.
To all our listeners out there, we encourage you to stay informed, stay engaged, and keep asking those tough questions about what's happening around you. The future of Kenya, like any democracy, rests in the hands of its people.
And remember, the story is far from over. There's new information coming out every day. The political landscape is constantly changing.
So stay curious, keep a healthy dose of skepticism, and most importantly, stay tuned. We'll be following this story closely, and we'll be here to guide you through all the twists and turns as they unfold.